Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs on the college campus are going the way of the wind. First at Columbia and now other universities, they're making deals that require them to turn over hiring and admissions data to the Trump administration, to pay millions to settle discrimination claims, submit to outside monitoring, and abandon DEI, or as the Trump administration put it, ensure, quote unquote, merit-based hiring and admissions. In return, the administration will release billions in federal funds that it was withholding. So, Jenny, what are we to make of the fact that universities are making a deal with the Trump administration? Are they selling out?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's a fair question to be asking right now. I'm going to start actually by unpacking a little bit the power that the federal government has over universities, because I think if you're not living in one, you're not quite clear, like how does the federal government actually exert this power? So as you mentioned, federal government resources go to grants, and those grants fund research like research I do that helps me hire students and pay for research participants, and a portion of that money goes to fund kind of the operations of the university. And so that's a major source of revenue for universities, and also a major relationship that the federal government has then with universities. So that's one major source. The other is that the federal government oversees the visa programs that the students who are admitted to universities from other countries go through. And so there is a leverage point that the federal government has around immigration and, well, specifically international students. And those, at least in my university, I suspect at yours too, international students now are a very important source of revenue because they typically pay full freight, if you will, the full cost of the tuition, whereas domestic students tend to pay less. So those are the mechanisms typically that the federal government has used or can use to help steer universities in ways that they wish. So that's that. On the DEI front, the Trump administration basically day one declared that diversity, equity, inclusion was dead. That in his America, everybody is looked at equally and there should be no special privileges for anybody. Now, the challenge has been that their DEI policies have been very vague. In fact, there really wasn't a policy, just no more DEI. And so universities have grappled with what that means and how do they negotiate. Look, universities are really conservative institutions, from my observation.
Fundamentally, yeah.
100%. Like they are trying very hard to conserve and preserve their mission, their stature, and as a result, I think in the face of these incredible pressures, they are functionally navigating them in ways that lead to these agreements.
The agreements. But let me push back a little bit, Jenny, and say this. You mentioned the federal funds cutoff mechanism that actually applies to so many parts of American society. That's how the federal government controls so much of what happens. But in the case of Harvard, which has a $50 billion plus endowment, in the case of Columbia, a $15 billion endowment. You remember John Lewis talked about good trouble, getting it. Why not just take the hit? I mean, Trump's not going to be in office forever. So why not take the hit, suffer for 2 or 3 years, and at least stand for something?
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's a very fair question. And legally, the universities likely would have come out ahead. By ahead, what I really mean is they likely would have won in the court because the efforts that the administration's been pushing are likely not legal. But they are settling. Again, having sat in the room where the decisions happen, what I see is that you have boards of trustees who are very conservative. Typically, they're very wealthy people, and they're tied in often ways to the administration. Yeah. They don't want the fight.
And to the market.
But there are a couple of things that, big endowments, most of those have strings attached to them. They are not able to just go and dip into that like a checking account. I believe Brown had to borrow $200 million in the face of this. So it's not quite as easy as saying that they should, just take the hit. The other thing, it's not just grants. The lever that worries, schools like Utica and perhaps I would think Moyne is also the financial aid lever. They have that over us, while it's not so much the NSA grants, although we have some of those there. Where they really can hurt smaller schools is by just saying, we're going to stop the grants, the student aid to you. We wouldn't last very long at all.
A lot of schools would actually shutter. Anirban,
I think the universities got spooked out being thrown into this chaos, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, you couldn't fight, and I think they should have fought it in the court, but in the meantime, if you lose a bunch of funding, that means you're losing students, you're losing graduate students, you're losing laboratories, many of the professors are in H-1B, you don't know what will happen to their status if they lose their jobs. So they say, because it's just a global system, American education system is, for lack of a word, it's a very global system. People from around the world come here and study and so on. So I think that's what spooked them out. But, I want to take a little bit sociological route, having a little bit of criticism about the DEI in itself, is that, I basically saw it as an intra-class rivalry among the professional managerial class. So one part of the professional managerial class is like, we only want conservative, we need merit. The other one is about diversity, but nobody is kind of asking that why access to elite institution is the only way you can think about racial justice.
Right.
If you do a polling among blacks, most blacks do not care about this, because 74% of people don't go to college.
Yeah.
Right? So kind of decoupling this idea that, racial justice can be achieved without going to an elite institution, maybe more jobs and more, opportunities and so on. So that might be an
I
issue.
do want to ask another question, just sort of piggybacking on your excellent point. 75% of Americans don't go to college anyway. And to your point about blacks, the U.S. population as a whole really was never behind DEI. So is that part of the strength of why Trump has been able to accomplish so much here? That he's got the public behind him.
Yeah, I think there was a progressive aspect of identity politics, but I have also said there's a regressive aspect, right? When you are, somehow trying to tell me that a poor white person who works 80 hours a week is somehow oppressing a bourgeois middle-class professor because they are brown, it doesn't sit right with most people, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be correct. And many people kind of push back on that, and since the idea is to make college affordable to most people, rather than this kind of
The other stuff, the
intra-class
social-
conflict that we are kind of caught up
That has to be
with.
fixed elsewhere.